In the 20th century, a former Jesuit priest broke away from the church to reveal something terrifying: that Earth is not what we think it is. According to Salvador Freixeido, our world is a farm, not of animals or crops, but of human beings. A system built to extract emotional and spiritual energy, controlled by non-human intelligences that have always remained in the shadows. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into his most controversial and revealing book, The Human Farm. A work that challenges everything you think you know about God, reality, and why we are really here. Stick to the end to uncover how religions, governments, and even your dreams may be part of a system designed to keep your soul in chains, and why Frixeido believed escaping it was the only path to true freedom. Salvador Freixedo was not a fringe conspiracy theorist. He was a trained theologian, a Jesuit priest, and a longtime scholar of religious phenomena. Born in Galicia, Spain in 1923, he was ordained into the Society of Jesus, one of the most intellectually demanding orders of the Catholic Church. For years, he served as a missionary in Latin America. But over time, Freixeido began to notice something unsettling. He didn't leave the church out of rebellion. He left because what he saw in the real world simply didn't match what the doctrine was telling him. There were testimonies of strange encounters, unexplained phenomena, patterns of manipulation in religious systems that no one seemed willing to acknowledge, and above all, a refusal by religious authorities to address any of it seriously. So he stepped away from the church and started to speak. Freixeido argued that the God described by mainstream religions did not align with the evidence. In his view, what many traditions call gods, angels, or divine beings are, in reality, non-human intelligences, not necessarily extraterrestrials in the science fiction sense, but entities of higher perception and intent, and not always benevolent. These beings, he said, have been interacting with humans for millennia, not to guide us, but to feed off us, especially through our beliefs, our fears, and our emotional energy. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he published dozens of books that challenged religious and scientific orthodoxy. Among them, Let's Defend Ourselves from the Gods, and most importantly, The Human Farm. In that book, he laid out his most radical idea, that Earth is not a divine creation or random accident, but a system, a soul-harvesting machine, and that much of human history, war, religion, and even spiritual beliefs may have been shaped to keep us inside it. And perhaps the most disturbing part? Freixeido wasn't the only one who believed it. To call Earth a human farm is not poetic exaggeration. For Salvador Freixeido, it was a literal diagnosis, not born of fantasy, but of decades spent studying theology, mysticism, ufology, and ancient belief systems. He argued that the signs have always been there, scattered across myth and history. We simply never dared to assemble them. In this paradigm, life is not divine orchestration or evolutionary chance. It is the operation of a closed system designed not to nurture the soul, but to extract from it. Freixeido called this extraction biopsychic yield, emotional energy in its most intense forms. Love, terror, grief, awe, not side effects of consciousness, but the crop. The elegance of the system lies in its invisibility. Like farmers domesticating animals, these forces, non-human in origin, domesticate consciousness. But instead of fences, humans are given beliefs, trauma, and the illusion of freedom. An illusion so convincing, most become complicit in their own containment. We kill for gods we never question, suffer in inherited roles we never chose, and replay traumas like sacred scripts. All of it, the confusion, the ecstasy, the heartbreak, feeds something. According to Frixeido, not divine beings but energetic predators, indifferent to morals, indifferent to meaning, interested only in charge. Here, suffering is not accidental, it is systemic, and even joy or spiritual love may serve as bait, highs that lead to crashes, ensuring constant emotional movement. Energy flows not toward enlightenment, but into an unseen layer of reality just outside our perceptual reach. Frixeido believed this system spans dimensions, embedding itself into the architecture of thought itself. That's why the most radical truths are dismissed as madness, while civilizations worship stories crafted by their harvesters. The system doesn't need secrecy, only distraction. Because if you truly knew, if you saw your deepest pain, faith, and joy as raw material in an invisible economy, you might stop producing. And that's the real danger. Frixeido never offered a cure, only a warning. Unless we become conscious of how this system feeds and learn to regulate the frequency of our emotional states, we remain what we've always been. Not souls seeking truth, but livestock mistaking the cage for the sky. But if Earth is a farm, then we must ask, who are the farmers? Who built this system of extraction, and what do they want from us? According to Frixeido, the answer is neither comforting nor fully comprehensible. These are not gods in any traditional sense, nor demons as imagined by religious iconography. They are what he called non-human intelligences, entities that exist beyond the electromagnetic spectrum of ordinary human perception, beings that have mastered manipulation without detection and who understand human psychology and emotion with far more precision than we do ourselves. They are not bound by physicality, though they can manifest it. They are not spiritual in the way mystics speak of ascended beings, though they operate on spiritual levels. They are, in Frixeido's view, something far more disturbing. Energetic predators. Not cruel for cruelty's sake, but utterly indifferent to the human experience beyond its utility as a fuel source. He compared their presence to that of parasites, sophisticated, ancient, and entirely embedded in the evolutionary history of human consciousness. Just as a shepherd doesn't explain his intentions to the sheep, these beings do not feel the need to justify their actions to us. They harvest because they can. Their influence, he argued, extends far deeper than mere myth or belief. They have shaped civilizations, seeded religions, orchestrated revelations, and implanted ideas of divinity tailored to maximize devotion and fear. It is not that all spiritual experience is false, Frixeido would clarify, but rather that many such experiences, especially those centered around submission, sacrifice, and guilt, are not gifts from a benevolent source, but bait, designed to trigger energetic output. These entities do not need to inhabit thrones of fire or descend in chariots of light. Their most effective method of control is anonymity. They rule by invisibility, operating behind the curtain of perception, altering human history not with swords, but with symbols, not with violence, but with suggestion. And most disturbing of all, Frixeido believed that we are not their only livestock. Humanity, he suggested, is merely one species among many across countless worlds and planes of existence. The Earth, in this framework, is a node in a much larger matrix, a feeding ground among thousands, a spiritual farm station in a cosmic ecosystem of extraction. This is why he warned that the greatest victory of these beings is not their ability to harvest energy, but their ability to remain unnamed. They do not need worship, only belief. They do not need followers, only participants. and they do not need to enslave us, because we enslave ourselves the moment we mistake the voice of the predator for the voice of God. If the human farm exists to extract energy, then it must have a mechanism to keep its resources from escaping. And that mechanism, according to Frixeido, is belief. Religions, he argued, are not the path to liberation. They are the walls of the enclosure. Across history, from Mesopotamia to modern Christianity, from the sacred texts of the East to the liturgies of the West, we find a shared structure: submission to invisible beings, fear of punishment, hope of reward, and a deep psychological bond to guilt, suffering, and obedience. These are not accidental similarities. Frixeido saw them as design, a psychological matrix carefully curated to keep the soul tethered. The gods of religion, in his words, are often the very entities that feed, disguising themselves as saviors, demanding loyalty, rituals, sacrifice, and emotional surrender. And what better way to keep a soul producing energy than to promise it peace while delivering endless struggle? He warned that the idea of salvation, when filtered through hierarchical institutions, becomes a tool of spiritual taxation. We pay in worship, in confession, in war, in silence, believing we're climbing toward the light while we're being drained from the shadows. But for those who begin to see through this layer, who reject the dogma or escape organized belief, there is still one final trick waiting: reincarnation. Rebirth, as celebrated by countless spiritual traditions, is often portrayed as a gift, a second chance, a step in the great wheel of karmic evolution. But Frixeido offered a chilling inversion of that narrative. What if reincarnation is not an opportunity, but a reset button? What if the soul, confused and weakened by trauma, guilt, or unfulfilled desire, is recycled back into the system, memory wiped, emotions raw, ready to be harvested once again? He believed that many souls don't reincarnate by choice, but by energetic gravity, pulled back into the material realm through unresolved emotion, karmic manipulation, or external interference. And the system, he said, ensures this by surrounding death with fear, confusion, and false light. Some near-death accounts describe tunnels, guides, beings of light. But Frixeido asked, how do you know who they really are? If an entity has manipulated your life, fed on your faith, whispered in your dreams, wouldn't it also control the moment of your death? In this view, the cycle of death and rebirth is not a divine law, but a containment protocol. The soul is prevented from ascending, from remembering, from escaping, and instead returned to the pasture, reinserted into the dream, where it will suffer, believe, and worship once again. Because the most effective farm is the one where even escape becomes another gate, where the promise of freedom is what leads you back into the cage. If this world truly operates as a harvesting system, then the natural question becomes, how does one escape it? The answer, however, is far from simple. This isn't a system you can flee from by walking away or rebelling against it with force. Its mechanisms are not chains or walls. They are beliefs, emotions, memories, dreams. It wraps itself around perception, embedding its control deep within the very fabric of what we call reality. Liberation, then, begins not with action, but with awareness. The first and most essential step is to stop believing. Not in a nihilistic sense, but in the radical, lucid rejection of externally imposed narratives. Blind belief, especially belief rooted in fear and hope, is the tether. Doctrines, dogmas, rituals, savior figures, all become energetic contracts. Each act of devotion, each burst of fear, each guilt-driven prayer is a form of consent. A current of emotional energy offered to a system designed to absorb it. So to break free, one must withdraw that consent. That means no longer feeding the story, not the one told by religion, not the one told by politics, nor the one whispered by false spiritual systems that promise light in exchange for surrender. Detachment is the beginning of escape. But this system is clever. It does not punish rebellion. It harvests it. Anger, despair, even defiant pride are still reactions, and reaction is energy. The only stance that eludes its grasp is neutral lucidity, a conscious stillness that resists provocation. True escape, then, is not heroic. It is silent. According to Frixeido, the ultimate trap lies not in life, but in what comes after it. At the moment of death, most souls are confused, emotionally disoriented, vulnerable. That's when familiar shapes appear, ancestors, divine guides, radiant beings, inviting them into the light, encouraging them to return, to try again. But what if those figures are part of the same system? What if that light is a lure? He suggested that the soul must retain awareness in that critical moment. It must question everything, even what appears loving. It must remember that it has a choice, that going toward the light is not the only option. Few manage to maintain this level of consciousness. Fewer still escape the pull of emotional attachment in death. But those who do, he believed, are not recycled. They slip through the gaps, beyond the reach of the harvesters. Not into heaven, not into some promised paradise, but into something older, quieter, and free from interference. Not ascension, not reward, just stillness, sovereignty. A return to original awareness, untouched, unharvested, unowned. Because the prison ultimately is not the world, it is ignorance. And the only real escape is lucid remembrance, not of who you were within the system, but of who you were before it existed. Perhaps the most terrifying truth is not that we are being harvested, but that we never questioned it. We are born into stories, stories about gods and heavens, about light and justice, about suffering having meaning. We cling to these stories not because they free us, but because they comfort us, because the alternative is unthinkable. That much of what we love, worship, and fear was designed to keep us obedient. We pray to names we didn't choose. We accept suffering as holy. We call the trap a lesson, the harvest a blessing, and the cage life. But if even a fraction of this theory is true, then everything changes. It means that true freedom isn't given to us. It isn't hidden in temples or waiting in the afterlife. It's taken through awareness, through brutal, lonely honesty, the kind that burns everything false to the ground and leaves only what cannot be manipulated, your will. Maybe that's why most people will never escape, because escape means seeing clearly. It means giving up everything that felt sacred but never was. It means realizing that what you thought was the exit is just another door back to the beginning. But if you've made it this far, it means something in you is already awake, already pulling at the thread. So pull harder. And if you want to go deeper, into the forbidden, the esoteric, the hidden architecture of this reality, leave a like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because what's coming next was never meant to be found.